Hi, I'm Ben Gilman, and today I'm going to be demonstrating my generative AI application.
Have you ever ran a SQL query you don't understand? Or perhaps you work with people who use SQL but have no understanding of SQL yourself. Now, with SQL Translator, my generative AI solution, anyone can understand any query of any level of complexity, and it is free on the website sqltranslator.net. First, I will demo the app, and then I will do an overview of how I made it for those interested. For those who are unfamiliar, SQL is a programming language designed for managing databases. Now for the demo of the app, I will show a simple query to explain what the app does, and then I'll show a complex query, and then I'll go over some alternative use cases. So let's start with our simple query. Select star from customers, which selects everything from the customers table. And the translator is also saying that as well. Now let's try inputting something complex that uses a recursive table and joins to create an employee hierarchy. And see, the app correctly identifies that, and then it goes on to describe how each part of the query works. Now I will give it this query that has an error in the join statement. Since it is right joining to the returns table, it should be returns.orderID equals orders.orderID. But there's an error, and instead it's orders.orderID equals orders.orderID. Now let's run it on the app. And the app correctly identifies both the error and the solution. Another use case of the app is to understand new functions. Let's say you've never heard of a cross-lateral join. I'll input that into the app, and then the app describes both what a cross-lateral join does and its use cases. Next, I'll give it an input that contains no SQL at all. I'll ask it, how long does a turtle live for? And see, the app correctly identifies that this is not SQL and says it can only translate SQL. SQLtranslator.net is an incredible resource for understanding SQL queries, and I have yet to encounter an error in its translations. For those of you who just wanted to see the app and what it can do, you can pretty much just stop here. For the rest of the time, I will be explaining how I made the app. It would take a longer time to explain this to a beginner. Rather, I'm going to try to explain this to a user who already has a base level understanding. SQL Translator is using a fine-tuned ChatGPT model with a custom prompt. First, I'll go over the prompt, which is just the instructions I give to ChatGPT that are all in plain English. Despite how simple this sounds, the prompt was actually quite difficult to set up. Just using a simple describe my SQL code in English prompt led to a lot of errors. For one, it would fail to describe the code in detail, which is necessary as the app is supposed to provide understanding to even those who don't know SQL. Also, it would answer inputs that were not SQL, and it would hallucinate frequently, which is an AI term for nonsensical output. For instance, I would type select star and it would respond select star, close parentheses, select, or something like that. However, I was able to eliminate or reduce the frequency of most errors using just the prompt. When trying to get the AI to explain in a way that a beginner could understand, directly stating this in the prompt did not help enough. ChatGPT would still fail to fully describe most complex queries. After research on prompt engineering tactics and a lot of testing, I decided to include the phrase, your objective is to make SQL accessible and comprehensible to everyone regardless of their technical knowledge. Stating this as an objective seemed to make the model give a higher priority to providing in-depth explanations. For getting the model to not answer non-SQL inputs, there were also a lot of problems. No matter what wording I used in the prompt, it would still ignore this in many instances. So I got creative and put examples in the prompt of natural language that was not SQL code and should not be answered. The examples provided a massive reduction in answering natural language input. The examples are no longer in the prompt because I used them in the fine-tuning dataset, making them redundant. I won't go into every detail about how I optimized the prompt, but prompt engineering was a big help in improving the app. Now, after I fully optimized the prompt, the next step was fine-tuning the model. Even with the optimized prompt, there were still errors that needed to be fixed. I tried using the model in many different cases, inputting complex queries, simple queries, unconventional queries, and natural language inputs, all to test the app. I identified instances where the model would make an error or not adequately describe a query. And then I created a dataset containing examples of input that would produce flawed output and what the ideal output should be. I then created a fine-tuning job based on this data with the OpenAI API in Python. And the fine-tuned output, which is the model I use for SQL Translator, successfully eliminated all these errors and flaws I identified. SQLtranslator.net is built using a Flask app on Python. Prior to this project, I had no experience with Python, and I had to learn a lot quickly, leveraging search, AI, and YouTube. The app as a whole took around 2 months to develop. I plan on adding new features in the future. I have a logging system on the app to see the input and output, so once I get more data, I can see if there are any more errors I can fix with the prompt or further fine-tuning. I also plan on eventually allowing users to ask follow-up questions to the app based on its output. I would also consider adding interactive SQL debugging as a separate feature. If anyone watches the video, uses the app, and has a recommendation for a new feature or identifies an error in the current app, please write a comment below. I look forward to hearing feedback. Visit www.sqltranslator.net to access the app today.